Today on The Resilience Show, I'll be sitting down with Congressman Tim Burchett.
And when an admiral tells you, Tim, they're real, and they describe something under the sea moving at 200 miles an hour the size of a football field.
In his home district at Smith & Wesson's new headquarters in Maryville, Tennessee. Congressman Burchett is one of the most outspoken members in U.S. Congress.
And I want to say something, I'm going to get these guys mad at me, but I really don't care. And every dadgum one of you all ought to step down.
And today we're going deep on some of the most contested topics in Washington. We're talking city block size underwater UFOs.
What was splashed? Mark, bearing, and range.
Jeffrey Epstein's intelligence ties.
I have no doubt that American operators cooperated with him at some point. You're the most watched prisoner in the world is allowed to commit suicide. I can't buy that.
Taxpayer money going to the Taliban.
When I started, it was $40 million a week. We send $40 million a week. We literally send them pallets of cash.
You're not going to miss this episode, so let's dive in. Guys, so we're here at Smith & Wesson headquarters in Maryville, Tennessee, and obviously a remote location for the Resilience Show. And as you guys know, I'm one of the, I would say one of the three, but I think we have five now, brand ambassadors, Smith & Wesson Firearms, outside of the work I do at the Resilience Show and Mighty Oaks Foundation. And, I'm not just an ambassador, but Smith & Wesson is one of the main sponsors for the show and brings these episodes to you every week. And, got a good display of some of the great Smith & Wesson's firearms. And next to me is the congressional representative for where Smith & Wesson headquarters is Congressman Tim Burchett. And this is your district and Smith & Wesson. I think you were here for the grand opening. We were here together.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was great. I had to leave, though. There's some guys out there cooking steak, and I was starving to death, and I had to be somewhere. And I told my wife I'd be there, and I thought, eating a great steak or getting my wife ticked off at me, I think I better get out of here.
Were you part of it was a big decision for Smith & Wesson to come here.
Well, I was actually mayor when it happened, and I was mayor of Knox County when the decision was made. But I was very excited about it. I knew when Blount County, though, because Blount County is just the ideal place. You got the mountains right there. You've got the major airport close in. And you've got some of the best people in the world. And Tennessee's a right-to-work state, and we're a low-tax state, and we love the Second Amendment. And so we, and I heard that Blount County was in line to get it was in competition. I knew they'd get it because they tore Knoxville's Chamber of Commerce to pieces. I mean, there's no comparison.
Yeah, I've become good friends with the CEO, Mark Smith, and Kyle Tingle, and they're just amazing people at this company. And I guess I'd really love to ask you from your side, because I'm biased. I love this company so much. I've been shooting Smith & Wesson since I was 6 years old, so becoming an ambassador for them is like, a dream come true for me. But what does it mean for Tennessee, for this county, for them how did it impact this county?
They chose us and we chose them, really. I mean, it was a mutual admiration. The people around here love our freedom. And they want to work, and they're hardworking people. And when I was mayor of Knox County, and I would go on recruiting things to recruit people just for the region, and I would bring them to Knoxville or the area, and I wouldn't take them to the country club or any of that. I'd take them out to a cafeteria. One of my favorite places, a place called Wright's Cafeteria that's no longer there, or Vol Market, and people there come in. They got 30 minutes for lunch. They got their names on their shirt. They want to work. They love their families. They love this great country. And it's a perfect place. And that's where I'd bring people like that to meet. And then they'd fall in love. Sure, and God's graced us with incredible beauty, the mountains, the streams. You can breathe outside. And the people, and it's we're low crime. We take care of business. We got great schools and we got great people. And that's the bottom line, is the people. They would always say, oh, that's great. But if I have to lean towards one way, it's going to be towards East Tennessee because of the people.
I get to meet, I have several friends who are members of Congress. I get to meet a lot of congressmen. I work on the Hill quite a bit. I was a surrogate on President Trump's campaign for 2000 Veterans Policy. So I get a lot of time in D.C. and I have a lot of opposition with people in Congress. Like many Americans, it's frustration. But there's a few guys up there that I really admire and respect, and you're one of them.
Thank you.
I think one, because we both share a deep Christian faith, and we're I think before we're in our positions that we serve in D.C., we're constituents first. I see you kind of serve that way. Yeah. And one of the problems I have with people in Congress in D.C. is they leave there, get elected by the people from their constituency, go there and then join part of the GOP in D.C. and forget that they actually are that word representative. They're representatives of those constituents, and they work for people in D.C. And you've seen have done the opposite of that. So,
Thank you.
with that said, I would just love to hear your take on what it means to be a representative of the constituents here.
You briefly described what a lot of people call the swamp, and I always say it's not a swamp. You know, a swamp is something pretty cool. You drive out, there's like a little wet spot down there, and that's sort of swampy. And I guarantee you, in the summertime, it's full of life. You'll see deer down there and frogs and fish, and it's created by God. It's an aquifer, and Washington D.C. is a sewer. It's created by man, and it stinks. And people get corrupted. You know, when I was elected to the state legislature, I watched it in Tennessee. You know, if you're chasing the ladies, if you're a drinker, if you're maybe a little loose with the law and could be bought and sold, it'll find you. It'll find you. And I was fortunate enough to spend 16 years in the legislature, and I saw great people I thought were good people, and they got sucked into it. And some of them took their own lives, and some of them got beat, some were humiliated, some of them went to federal penitentiary. And I was always, Mom and Daddy were just hardworking people. And I was brought up in a Christian home. Daddy fought in the Pacific in the Second World War. He's a Marine. He was on a little island called Peleliu. He had 8 weeks of basic training. He was my dad was incredibly smart. Unlike myself, he had a very high IQ. And the Marine Corps, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41, Daddy enlisted in the Marine Corps because he thought he needed to get at him. He was a young man, about 18 or 19, and he took the IQ test, and they said, man, my daddy was incredibly smart and gifted. And they said, we want you to go to Georgia Tech and become an officer. And my daddy he went there and he thought, man, I'm going to miss this dadgum war. And so Daddy, in his infinite wisdom, just did not take his midterm exams and failed himself out. And then my mama, and then 8 weeks, he went to basic training. 8 weeks later, they issued him a Thompson submachine gun. He was on a little island called Peleliu. If you know anything about the history of the Marine Corps.
I do. I was a Marine.
Oh, my daddy's colonel was Chesty Puller on Peleliu. So if that means anything to you.
Means a lot.
It sure does. And I guess I take some of my leadership style from that, because Chesty wasn't Daddy, the men loved him. They loved him. But Chesty wouldn't, or Colonel Puller, I guess, I didn't know him. Yeah. But he wasn't one of those guys that was back on the ship barking out orders. He was right there with them. Daddy said they'd be out in a spot and like, what the heck? There's Colonel Puller, you know? And my dad was a combat engineer, and he saw some awful things.
Particularly in that campaign, to be a combat engineer, that would have been a very...
Pillboxes, he did a lot of caves. And until the day Daddy died, you would never wake Daddy up over the top of him. You would always wake him up by his big toe, because he might wake up on one of those islands and pin you up against a wall. And went to Okinawa, invasion there, which was light. Then it erupted later. The Japanese split up on the other side. And then Daddy went to China after the war and fought the communists there. And his buddy Possum Head came to him on Okinawa and said, Charlie, they just dropped the bomb on Japan. They said, one bomb. He said, these suckers are tough. They didn't know anything about atomic bomb. And then then he went to China, like I said, and fought the communists. And there's not a lot of history on that, but he was over there for a while. I've got some cool pictures. And then he went to University of Tennessee, and I guess he fought the communists over there for 40 years. And then her old mama was the youngest of 7, didn't have electricity till she's a senior in high school. She's from Cheatham County. Dad was from the big city of Clarksville over in Middle Tennessee. Like I said, Mama didn't have electricity till she's a senior in high school, and her oldest brother, Roy, was too old to go. He enlisted. They sent him home. They called him back up D-Day. They needed bodies. Went through basic at 32, became a sergeant, was killed in what they called the hedgerows. And if you go in my Knoxville office, there's a 48-star flag. And I look up at that flag every day because I think about my mama. Every time that flag would unfurl, they played that national anthem at a UT football game when I was a little boy. I can remember looking up at her, and she would start crying. And I knew she was talking about her brother, or thinking about her brother, Roy. And he was heavily educated, and he was exceptional, like the rest of her family. But she lost him, and so Mama said she needed to do something. So my mama flew an airplane during the Second World War. She was in what was called the Civilian Air Corps. Not a lot about it. She didn't go to combat or anything, didn't fly overseas. But, a little country girl, 17 years old. I mean, when I was 17, I wasn't even sure how to turn on a dadgum microwave. Yeah. And there's my mama. And I tell you all that because that's what I come from. I want people to realize I didn't come from money. it took me 6 years to get out of the University of Tennessee, and I didn't drink or smoke pot. I have a degree in technological adult education. I was certified to teach shop. And so factories like this fascinate me, and working people, I feel I feel a closeness to folks like that, and they do to me.
Yeah.
And I grew up here. So I love this area, man. I love the people. I always joke around, it's great to be in a place where nobody speaks with an accent, you know. and I'm from, unfortunately, everybody else in the country has found out about East Tennessee as well, or Tennessee in general.
Everyone's coming here.
Yeah, and that's all right. And that's all right. I love it. As long as they want to keep it like it is, I dig that. But so when I get to Washington, D.C., I was watching when I was at State of the Union, and I saw those Medal of Honor recipients, and I was thinking about my mom and my daddy, and I was just infuriated that, the folks across the aisle wouldn't even stand up for some of those. Little girl, I married my wife and I adopted her little girl, who's now mine. She's 18 now, but when she's 4 or 5, I mean, that little girl got run over by an illegal alien, and she's fought for her life, and she'll never, be able to do the things I do, run and things, and her daddy picked her up and she kissed her daddy on the cheek, and that's what I'm here for. And I love our Constitution. I love our rights. It's not always easy, but God put us on this planet, and we better pay attention, or we'll lose it all. We could lose it all. There's a lot of people that don't like that. They don't like our second. Hell, they don't even like our First Amendment.
Right.
And so I worry about where our country's going, and I think about that every day. I vote against a lot of stuff people in my own party put forward, because we're almost $40 trillion in debt, and it takes away just some small liberty. It's just always just something. No, let's just give in a little bit. And that compromise is what's gotten us in trouble, brother. And
That's right.
And I'm very, you asked me a big question there, and I've talked too much. I apologize.
You're good. You're good. That's, it's really important to know what, where men like you come from as you represent your constituencies. And, because DC is not a swamp, a cesspool. And and by the way, for your family, my family goes back World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. My father's a Marine. I'm a Marine.
Wow.
Both my sons are Marines. So we're very much a Marine Corps family. So Semper Fi to your father, and that's awesome though. Your family has that kind of service. I want to talk to you about, because as a representative, you've been involved in a lot of stuff that I'm super interested in, particularly like the disclosure of things within our government, the secrecies of like releasing Epstein files to UFO UAP disclosure, and all the stuff that people would say conspiracy stuff. I don't believe they're conspiracies anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. They're prophecy, right?
I just did a big survey, and something like 55% of this country thinks we're not alone. So that's I'm on the right side of history, it looks like.
Well, I've really went down this because I love studying biblical history. I've really gotten into the book of we're looking at Genesis 6 and the Watchers and the book of Enoch. I know the book of Enoch's not in the canon, but we're just at the.
No.
It was with the Dead Sea. It's found with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yep, sure
Highly
was.
revered, book 1, the Watchers, and so is some of this activity like pre-diluvial, antediluvial, pre-flood technology that lingered over? Is it extraterrestrial from outer space? I believe the Bible does reference extraterrestrial life, because he says
Ezekiel chapter 1.
Yeah.
Ezekiel saw the wheel. Genesis 1, chapter 1. God created the heavens and the earth. I mean, we are one grain of sand in 100 million beaches, dude. I mean, it's
not even fathomable, right?
It's hard for us, or as the good old boys would say, it's hard for me to fathom. But yeah, it's hard for us to fathom. But yeah, I've, and honestly, there's some things I can't talk about, okay, that I've
Obviously.
seen. I've seen in skiffs, or some of our alphabet agencies, you might call them, have briefed me on things. And I had a pretty long conversation with the president just a couple of days ago. And I said, Mr. President, I just want you to release everything that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And because he asked me, he said, you think they're real? I said, something's going on, Mr. President. We're spending billions of dollars on something. And, I have a pilot, one of the best ones in the world, military pilot. He said, Tim, that thing he goes like this, 14 feet from my canopy. 14 feet. So that tells me he didn't say 15 like you and I would say.
Right.
20 feet, 10 feet. He said 14 feet. And we mischaracterize a lot of our pilots. So he's talking about them being these cowboys, wild ass, drunks. These guys are engineer types.
Yeah.
They're landing a $500 million apparatus on a bucking battle or aircraft carrier out in the middle of the ocean.
We said bucking like moving 15, 20 feet of sea swell.
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm talking about. You've seen it. I've not seen it in person, but I know enough. I've looked at the numbers because that's my thing about, fiscal responsibility. And when an admiral tells you, Tim, they're real, and they describe something under the sea moving at 200 miles an hour the size of a football field, we don't have anything that comes close. We don't have anything that probably doesn't even get to 40, 42 miles an hour. We might, but it's under very specific conditions. We're here at Smith & Wesson. If I'm sitting in a pool that's 20 feet across, my chief of staff, Jenny's over there, and I would shoot that gun underwater, it probably wouldn't even make it to her.
Right.
And you're talking about the friction and just everything. And then how do you travel light years? That's another thing I don't get, but I start talking to these physicists, and there's a quantum, I think they call it quantum physics, how something can vibrate over here and then be over here. And to me, that just defines God. I mean, he can instantaneously omnipresent. And we have probably 5 or 6 deep sea areas. And I've been misquoted on this. I'm just stating what I've been told. We have 5 or 6 deep sea areas that we know more about the surface of the moon than we do the ocean floor or these areas. And these sightings are happening more and more in these areas. And so it lends you to believe that there's something and they're flying into the water. You've all seen the videos. I'm sure if you haven't, you can go on YouTube. And these are in those areas. And so what the heck is going on? I just want to know what's going on. But I have to counter that with government's evil, all right? All they're trying to do is get more of our money. Are they pulling a big psyop on me when they show me things that I saw maybe, 6 or 8 weeks ago at one of these agencies in a skiff, and which is a secure, it's James Bond. It's like a lead-lined.
Secure compartmentalized information facility.
I've been in there and people have a watch on or a cell phone. Hey, we're picking up a watch. Somebody's got a watch or a cell phone. They go, oh, crap, I'm sorry. Because they don't allow me with that kind of stuff. I'd break it. I get a cell phone. About every 6 weeks, it's cracked. But anyway, so, and I go into this thing and, and there's movies out now, this Age of Disclosure, I was in it, and there's a lot going on.
Hey guys, Robichaux here, former Marine, humanitarian, and host of The Resilience Show, and I want to talk to you about Goldco. I do not like to promote anything that I'm not a personal user of, and one of the things I'm really into and have been for a while is just preparing for anything that could go wrong, from natural disasters to security threats to the grid going down and financial instabilities, particularly in our financial markets. And so a long time ago, I made the decision to invest in precious metals, mainly gold and silver, because to have those tangible assets on hand makes you prepared and makes you resilient. And that's what the Resilience Show is all about, informing, educating, and equipping people to be resilient. And I partnered with the #1 precious metals company in the industry because I want to bring the right people not only to my own family dynamic, but make them available to you. If you're looking for gold and silver tangible on hand, then they're the place to go to. They have become an incredible partner, and they have special bonus offers that you can find if you go to chadlikesgold.com. You could get, if you buy with cash, you get 10% extra, a free gold or silver. You get your own safe at your house. For larger orders, you get a free home safe. There's tons of additional things you can get. So get equipped, be prepared, be resilient by going to chadlikesgold.com and get your tangible gold and silver today. So I know you can't say the things they showed you, but
I just want them to do it. If Trump unleashes it, that's great.
Well, he's tasked the Secretary, Pete Hegseth, the Department of War.
I know Pete, but I talked to him the other night, so I hope. But again, and I'm in a meeting, and I won't say where, and I won't say with who.
Okay.
But I'll just say, you and I pay their salary, all right? They're federal people.
Okay.
And the guy says to me, I said, well, what about the president on this thing? And they said, well, the president's on a need-to-know basis.
That's what I'm sure you know Dr. Greer. And, some people love Dr. Greer, some people don't.
I know him.
but one of the things he says that I agree with, and Congressman Burleson has also validated this,
Eric. Sure.
is that some government entities that are in this space of UFO, UAP, they don't fall under congressional authority or executive authority of the president. So they're operating outside of that. Is that accurate? Is that true?
I don't know. I think more what they do is they turn it over to, a Raytheon or somebody like that. And when I say these names, I want you to know I'm not suicidal. So if you find me tomorrow with 12 bullet holes in the back of my head and I've fallen off an Alp somewhere, I don't ski and I'm not suicidal. But they turn them over to these non-government corporations, the material, I think. There's 5 or 6 of them. And we don't have FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. It's like if I wanted to FOIA Smith & Wesson. I can't do that. They're a private corporation. I can FOIA them, but they don't have to respond. Their lawyers tell you to go jump in the lake, and they should. And I think that's what they've done with any material if it's out there. The Roswell stuff, all that, everybody, we need to go to Area 51. Let's have a CODEL, a congressional delegation, As soon as we announce wherever we're going, the U-Haul trucks have already been there and left. And there ain't nothing at Area 51. If there's anything in any of our bases, it'd be like Wright-Patterson or someplace like that. But it's already been, I think it's been disseminated. And I honestly think that the people, if it's out there, the material or the craft or whatever, the people that are looking at it probably don't know what they're looking at. And so it's that compartmentalized. And when I kind of blew the lid off this thing because I went to the first time they'd ever, in my memory, or Intelligence Committee had an open meeting on UFO, UAPs. And they had a black guy and a white guy. I always remember because I had all these seats behind them set up for congressmen, and I was the only one to show up. And I just said, and my phone kept going off. People said, Burchett, I can't believe you're there. What's going on? And I got a lot of information off that. But they kept asking them questions about documented cases. And they say, I don't know anything about that. And these were documented things that had happened. We had a nuclear facility that literally shut down after there was a sighting over the top of it. And all these other things, we don't have any data on that. I remember when I was in one meeting, I said, I don't have any data points on that. Some guy with a man bun, and I just wanted to go smack him one time. But I get very frustrated with that. And so I realized at that point that these guys are compartmentalized. You're looking down the barrel of a .22 basically, and that's their knowledge. They have no knowledge outside. And they're probably patriotic Americans, but by nature and by design, they are not given that information. So they don't know. If they were to go in court and swear or take a lie detector, they'd pass it. But they just don't know what's outside that little bitty parameter. And I walked by the press, and it was a huge gaggle. And I've been in a bunch since then, bigger, but to me it was huge. And the guy had the boom, and he was leaning over, and there weren't any congressmen. They say, hey, Congressman, what do you think about the hearing? And I said, we got hosed. And that was my quote. And then it was, boom, went out over the internet. And all of a sudden I was a UFO guy. And because I'd studied it my whole life since I was a kid. But and the guys in they were mad. I can't believe we're even studying this. And I'm thinking, something that's operating in our airspace around billions of dollars of our aircraft, and our trained men and women are risking their lives that are up there in the air. We've scuttled missions because of these things. It's been documented, and they don't even care. So yeah, the whole thing stinks. We got to get to the bottom. The only way we're going to do it is if Donald J. Trump turns those files loose, and they can't be these redacted files with all the
right.
Do
you think he has? I guess does he have the authority to do it, and are we going to actually see something?
He 100% has the authority to do it, but he doesn't know. I don't think he'll know what to ask for. And myself and some other people that are close to him are going to be talking to him about the right things to ask for. I think because Trump doesn't. He's not going to mess around. Him. He's not going to mess around.
And I believe, Pete, I'm friends with Pete as well.
He's a good man.
I believe Pete will do what the president asks, but he just needs to know what he's asked to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the problem,
right.
So, and I've said in those meetings with those arrogant jerks that don't want to answer the questions, and I sit there looking at these military men, and they've got all the stripes on, and I read people. I guess God gives you a gift, and that's my one gift. And this little smart aleck, arrogant jerk, and those military heroes were sitting there, and I could just read their expressions that they couldn't believe they were taking orders from this punk, for one thing, and they wanted to disclose, and they couldn't.
Yeah. How much? So let's say Secretary Hegseth gets the orders from Trump. How much pushback are they going to get from?
100%, 100%. You'll have members of Congress that will. You'll have the military-industrial complex, the war pimps, as I call them, a lot of them in Congress that are really just portfolio warriors that vote for wars because they've got stock in those companies, I think. And you can go, it's pretty much public record what stocks they own, and you can guess what committees.
Connect the dots.
Yeah, you can connect the dots, brother. My daddy had a plaque on his desk after he died. I found it. It said, "Old men make decisions and young men die."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I speak pretty ill of the military-industrial complex, although I always try to make the point known that I do want America to have the biggest, baddest, greatest weapons in the world.
I don't want it to be fair. I remember they asked Colin Powell, "You're going against a bunch of, goat herders, and you've got this, satellite technology."
Yes.
He said, "Good."
Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, that's what we should. We should have but I believe with that comes abuse of that, and I believe that's what you see, like in Ukraine.
It goes from responsibility to abuse.
It is. I mean, when you look at Ukraine, everybody talks about the billions of dollars, but 80% of it stayed back here in the military. It's profitable.
Yeah, I was told by these Democrats, Burchett, you ought to be for this. I said, "Why? It's great for the economy." I said, "What are you telling me?" He said, "Well, it's all coming back. They're buying American weapons." And I said, "Dude," I said, where's your freaking conscience? Your portfolio is killing people. Let's figure out a peaceful. That's why
I spent 10 trips on the front line of Ukraine, evacuating people and seeing the bodies of civilians, and that's the cost.
Well, that's why my dad would not go back to Okinawa, because the Japanese had abused civilians, and he found some of those people, and he went back to the 50th anniversary of the invasion of Peleliu, but he wouldn't go back to Okinawa.
Well, thank you for pushing back on that, because the military-industrial complex is great, but the room for abuse, for profiteering, and the warmongers in D.C., the neocons.
Neocons. That's the people. You got to quit saying war pimps, Burchett.
I like war pimps.
It carries.
I like war pimps.
It carries. I was on one station, and a guy came on afterwards and said, "Tim Burchett just said war pimps." I'm gonna steal that from him, and I got the tape of him saying that. So.
People don't even know what neocon is, but people know what war pimp is.
Yeah. And their business is war, and it's pretty good.
It's good. It's good business. And like I said, I want them to be making the best weapons. I just don't want them to.
I want it to be unfair.
Kill people.
Yeah.
Kill people, or do it at the cost of innocent life. You mentioned like craft. Like I've heard this from pretty reliable sources, that there's a craft in South Korea that's so big that we
built
actually
a mountain around it.
Built it. You know anything about that being true, or can you even talk about it?
I know a little bit about it. I would just be cautious on stuff like that. To have a secret, you got to have two people, and one of them has to die.
Yeah.
And it's things get. I mean, let's just stick with what we do know. I mean, Roswell. There's just so many other incidents that have happened in this country.
We know it's real.
That I think are real. I 100% think they're real, and something happened, and I don't know what it is. And I'm not afraid of them.
Mm-hmm.
With that kind of technology, if they want to end us, they've already done it. I just don't. And and Luna and some of those other guys, and maybe the doctor you're talking about there, they talk about interdimensional craft. I'm not there yet. Yeah. If I had a time machine, I'd go back to 1962. I mean, a Ferrari GTO, and I would stuff the glove box with Fantastic Four #1s, and then I'd come back and live on an island.
Yeah.
You'd come visit me.
Yeah, it sounds like a plan, yeah. The one thing that raises a question of why the secrecy is, whenever you see something like people go so out of the way to keep a secret, there's a motivation there. And so for me, my speculative mind goes to the motivation. And so here's where I land, and I just want to tell you my theory and hear your thoughts on it. I don't think this has anything to do with keeping the identity of aliens or extraterrestrials or ancient beings from the public. I believe it has to do with technology. And I do believe that 0-point energy exists. And if 0-point energy was available to humanity, people would have heat and power and it's sustainable. And the world would change in a good way, but the petrol industry would lose thousands of trillions of dollars immediately. And so is this a cover up or a hiding the technology?
Sure.
Is that the motivation?
You get the hydrogen car, you bust the the molecule on a glass of water, and they're out of business.
So people
And,
die. People die coming up in
I
inventions.
mean, just look at diamonds. Look at diamonds, for instance. We find out maybe they're not as rare as we once thought they were, and now they're making them in the lab. You tell me. And so to think that's not far-fetched, and the zero energy, what'd you call it?
0 point energy.
0 point energy. Yeah, I brought that up after the first hearing we had, because that would put them all out of business. We wouldn't be going, the war pimps would be out of business because we wouldn't be going to war over oil or energy. People could heat their homes in the winter and cool them in the summer. But if you look at one of those craft in the video, the TikTok video, make sure I got that TikTok. No, TikTok. What's the candy? TikTok. TikTok's the candy. No, Tic Tac is the candy. The Tic Tac videos, because they look like that.
Tic Tac, yeah.
The amount of energy that those things would have to be able to do that, we had somebody testify and did the math on it. Again, they're not some cowboy out there with a child tobacco and a pistol on their hip. These guys are scientists. And he did the energy on that, just the capabilities of this thing. I mean, we had testimony of things hovering for 5 and 6 hours out over the ocean, just the ability to do that. And then they would just go straight up out and nothing. You don't see a heat sensor or anything. And the ability to do that, I mean, that would heat or cool a small town for years. Just the ability to be able to do that, the craft that size and that much energy to go from zero to whatever. And then the technology for it not to immediately combust. And if there's a being inside of it, not to be turned into a ketchup package because of the G-force.
Yeah,
so
making right turns at 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, you're gone. Your body's still going that way. Your organs are anyway. So that would put them all out of business. I think that's an area of a concern. I think they've got stuff. Somebody has some stuff. I've talked to some pretty good, reliable folks that they just can't figure out. They just can't figure it out. And I always give the example, I'm a motorcycle guy, so I always figure out, you take a brand new Harley or a brand new Indian, and you take it back in time to the folks that came over here on the Mayflower. They're going to look at it. They're going to shine it. They might get it started. They don't have the capabilities to make the fuel for it. They not really even sure what to do with it. They wouldn't even know how to blow up the tires. And that's sort of what you're looking at. And, if we were to get some kind of craft, what will we do with it? Because if it can travel at those speeds and things, and that's the whole, the plasma thing and the quantum physics deal, how that fits into all that. Yeah. Because light years, you're traveling thousands of light years. At the speed of light, it takes 1,000 years to get from here to there. How can anything survive in that? So it's just, there's a lot more than my little mind can grasp right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can't quite comprehend.
And I'm friends with some guys. Avi Loeb, he's a big physicist up here at Harvard. He's world renowned, and those guys can figure it out. They explain it to me, and I'm just like me trying to explain to them how a Holley 4-barrel carburetor works. I don't think they quite get it either.
Yeah, we all have our gifts,
our limits. Yeah, our gifts.
Well, I could spend days talking with you about this subject because I'm so passionate about it and it's so interesting.
Good.
I know you are.
We
too.
need disclosure. We don't need to let up.
Yeah, and we do, and I'm so thankful that we have a disclosure president right now, and we have men like you up on the hill. So I'm thankful for that. When you talk about disclosure and disclosure president, Epstein
right.
is right front and center right now. Love the president. I think he's the greatest president in my lifetime, and it's been made more impact. The one thing I hadn't really been happy about is the push to get past the Epstein thing, and I'm like, the American people are not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it go.
No, and they shouldn't.
And we shouldn't.
And I can talk a little bit about that. The Biden administration had those files for over 4 years. Matter of fact, Obama's people had access to some of it, I believe. And then, and honestly, I don't think if there's anything detrimental on Trump that they would have
let it out.
Kamala Harris and Biden probably wouldn't, because he wasn't really in a cognizant state. I don't think this 4 years in office, but people around him were, in the Obama administration that was sort of helping run things from behind. They would have. But there is, and two, I worry about the files being tampered with, and I was in some of those I've been a lot of the meetings. I'm in oversight, so I'm I'm in this meeting, and it's a closed-door meeting, and they've got some of the girls, they're ladies now, that were trafficked and abused, and I believe they were. I have dealt with that my whole political life since I've been in the legislature. I passed some of the toughest laws in the country. ICAC in Tennessee was one of the first in the country. Internet crimes against children, they'd pose as kids on the internet, and they'd catch those dirtbags and give them justice. They wouldn't give them the same justice most people in East Tennessee. They'd never found them.
Right.
They'd be underneath somebody's tomato beds right now, but
Rightfully
so, absolutely. But the girls were in the room, and so I'm talking to them. We're talking to them. They're giving testimony. Their lawyers there, and they all say, "Want a disclosure." And this one lady says, "I want this information because I blacked it out. Everything that happened to me was blacked out, and I know I'm in those files, and I want to read those files and find out what they did to me." And I said, "Do you want your name released?" "Oh, no. I don't want my name released." And that was the first, that was maybe 6 months ago. That's the first person I'd ever heard said that they didn't want the files released. And the reason they didn't want her name out, but she wanted to get a hold of those files. And now we're finding that allegedly that some of the ladies and maybe the men that were involved that are claiming they were trafficked were, as adults, responsible for bringing in other kids, young people. So now they've become the traffickers. And so there's a question of, and some of their names are blocked out. Now they've committed a crime. The law doesn't designate, whether how bad, when at the sentencing, they say, well, he was mistreated, whatever, she was mistreated. And so there's a real problem there that we've got.
Victims became offenders.
And a lot of this is just emails. And so you're not, you've got to go back. There's over 1 million. The guy was a collector too of friends. You got to remember in 2006, Trump called the authorities in on him and said, "This guy's a bad dude.
Yeah.
He's messing with kids or something." He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago later, or about that time, said, "I don't want the guy around. He'd messed with some girl that worked there," and Trump said, "No go." And so there's a lot of things in there, and a lot of people flew on his planes. And the flip, I always remember when Marsha Blackburn, in a committee she served on, she's a senator from Tennessee. Dick Durbin was the chairman of the committee, and she asked for the flight logs. Marsha Blackburn, very tight. I'm close to her. She's close to President Trump. And she said, "I want the flight logs." And Dick Durbin acted like he didn't know what she was talking about. He started mansplaining to her, and the national media covered for her. Mm-hmm. And now that Trump's in the White House, it's done a complete 180. Mm-hmm. So, and there's some pretty graphic, awful stuff in there. And I would encourage people, if they had the opportunity to read it, I would take a step back, because there's some pretty awful stuff in there.
Yeah. I think from what I saw, the president's vindicated, so I think he's cleared.
He knew the guy. He's in New York. But I know a lot of people.
Yeah,
I remember John Wayne Gacy. He was a mass murderer. Rosalind Carter, the president, you pay $50 and get your picture made with the president's wife, kind of thing. And apparently he got his picture made with, it's just, that's just one instant. But now there was a lot of, he ran around, and Trump will tell you, he was around. He knew him, but he knows a lot of people.
He did, yeah. So I do hope that, I think with Massey and Kana that we're doing.
Ro Khanna.
Yeah. I think what they're doing is, by pushing forward, hopefully they get, I don't know. I just want to see full disclosure.
I want disclosure. I wish the politics was taken out of it. I wish we just get full disclosure. I agree with you.
The one thing that I'm worried about is how it's going to impact the midterms. So are you concerned about that at all?
I'm worried about the midterms. I'm worried about that because we're terrible messengers. The Republican Party generally is. We've done a horrible job of that.
The Republican Party has lost the narrative on a lot of things, including immigration.
Yeah, immigration, the big, beautiful bill. The largest tax breaks for people. Trump's housing deal he put together is allowing people to get, by executive order, he stopped these corporations from going in and buying up houses just at any price, and then turns around and rents them at crazy amounts of money, and people are stuck. And somebody offers you twice or 50% more than what your property is worth, and you're selling it, you're going to sell it. You're idealistic, but but you got babies to feed, and that capital gains takes a huge chunk out of it anyway. So, yeah, he's done some incredible things in this, bringing pharmacy prices down, things like that. The price of gasoline's down. Inflation, it's on the rise. It's always on the rise, but it's creeping now compared to what it was doing under Biden. And you can't deny that our enemies fear us.
No.
And our friends love us again. And
a strong America is a safe world.
Yeah, and the tariff thing, up until 1914, Americans didn't pay an income tax. And it was all derived from tariffs, and we were flush with cash. And part of that is you go back to the recent history, when the Japanese motorcycle guy, when Japanese were dumping 1,000cc motorcycles into our market, into America, that they were selling them for less than they could make them. And Harley Davidson was the only company making 1,000cc. And Harley was getting ready to go down the tubes. And Willie G. Davidson, I think 6 or 7 of the others got together and pooled their resources, mortgaged their homes, cashed in everything they had, and bought Harley back from AMF, took it public. And those tariffs gave Harley Davidson time to get back on and then you saw what happened. They boomed. And then now they got a guy that's never ridden a motorcycle with a man bun running Harley, and they're going back under. But Ronald Reagan, they asked Willie G. Davidson, said Washington saved Harley Davidson. He said, no, Ronald Reagan saved Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
And that's what a tariff can do.
It is. I mean, and the tariffs, it takes the burden off the American taxpayer and puts it on those who want to make money off the American taxpayer.
Yeah. And it cuts their profits down, and you might pay a little more, but it's that income tax comes down a whole lot less.
I'd rather have a say-so to pay more than be mandated to pay in taxes.
We were on track until the Supreme Court ruling. We were on track to, some of these folks were, Trump was going to issue a $2,000 check to working class people, and that's people making up to like over $100,000 a year, and we're going to get $2,000 back. That would have set pretty well, I would think, and they reduced their tax burden by that much. So yeah, and the money was coming in more than they knew what to do with. Even Trump said, he was talking to. I was in the White House. We were talking to him about it, and he said, the Treasury I met a couple times head of the Treasury, and he was saying we didn't know where the money was coming from. We had all this surplus coming in, or more than we expected, and then we found out it was the tariffs. They were doing more than we thought they would.
Yeah. Two more questions on.
No, you're good.
On Epstein.
Please.
One, we're seeing Prince Andrew getting arrested and stuff like that. The American people, right or wrong, almost have a lynch mob mentality. Like, we voted for this, we want it. I think American people have lost confidence in the justice system. We believe there's a 2-tier justice system. I believe there is. And I think we want to pound the flesh, and somebody has to be held accountable.
Yep.
I don't think
people want to see, and I've
expressed I don't think they're going to feel like there's justice again until they see it. And then it seems like, Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, who I was, cheering for, but it seems like they have closed the door on this. But if it wasn't for Congress, you guys are pushing for the Clintons to come forth and testify. So are we going to see actually someone?
I hope so, but I don't know.
Pay the price.
I hope so, but I don't know. You're going to have to charge them, and you're going to have to make it stick. Charging them and making it stick is two different things.
Yeah.
As an old buddy of mine a guy named Joe Haynes, that's a Democrat from Nashville. He's since passed away. He was my friend. Went to UT, as a matter of fact. But he said, you can indict a ham and cheese sandwich, but that means it's going to make it stick. And it takes so long. And, just because something's on an email,
that's not a crime.
Yeah, I got to have a visual, to get a judge and jury to convict them. And that's tough to do. That's why my dad used to say, that's why I know there's a heaven and a hell, because there's balance in the universe.
Well, yeah. There will be.
And look, I've held the hand of a mother that's had a kid abused, or a kid that's been abused when they were younger, and it's a life sentence. I proposed the death penalty in Tennessee. It got ruled unconstitutional. The current legislature passed it. I'm glad. I did the ICAC. I passed laws on internet porn against children. At the time when they would catch somebody with the porn on their phone, or the phones weren't even there yet, but on their computer, the way the law was written, it was just one charge, and they could have a million instances of abuse on their computer, and I changed that to be each likeness or each individual photo. And so a lot of people went to jail and did some things with the bonds and things like that. And it's just it's a changing deal, and we got to be vigilant, and parents got to be paying attention. I always tell folks, if your kid can reach out there on that computer, somebody can reach into your kid's house and their room.
Yeah. So my last question to Epstein is this: it's more my theory. I spent my life in special operations and intelligence community, and definitely understand how extortion works. And I personally believe that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset for the Israeli government in extorting people of political power, of influence, and I believe, unfortunately, our government was probably involved in it and complicit with it as well. And because of that, just knowing how that works, it's very difficult for me to believe that someone like Jeffrey Epstein didn't have a kill trigger, and that would mean that he's still alive. I personally think he's still alive.
Okay.
So
I think he killed himself. I put it out on Twitter about 15 minutes later. Before,
Yeah.
I think I was sitting down at the beach and eating at his little store, and I put out that I hope somebody doesn't suicide him. And then somebody called me from the boss. Epstein just killed himself. I go, what? But no, I don't know that I think he worked for a lot of different entities, and I think he was a manipulator. I think he collected friends, and he used them, and he was pathological in his pursuit. And I have no doubt that American operators cooperated with him at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And you figure the most watched prisoner in the world, or the most is allowed to commit suicide. I can't buy that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't buy that. And So again, I'm not suicidal.
Yeah, I had to ask that because,
and I don't think we're ever going to get anything on the Clintons. If you had anything about that,
I don't think we will either. There's
a reason. I told the press corps that yesterday in D.C. There's a reason they're not in the penitentiary right now. Yeah. They're smarter and they know too much on too many people.
Unfortunately, there is a two-tier justice system.
There is a two-tiered justice
system. It's unfortunate, but it's just something that I feel like has to be just said.
I speak to a lot of prisoners, and I tell them that. I say the reason I'm not, some of my buddies aren't in prison, because they had a good attorney.
Yep. I was. I'm not sure how much you know about my background. I did 8 times in Afghanistan with JSOC, and Afghanistan evacuation was horrific for me. I went back and evacuated my interpreter, and we got 17,000 people out. So I was a big part of the evacuation.
We lost some people. We were working with that in our office, and we lost some folks. The little girl that works in our office she's from this area, and she's wonderful, and she worked around the clock on that. And it was a nightmare. The Biden administration, I'd done part of this deal, but there's a kid named Ryan Canals, Staff Sergeant Ryan Canals. He was killed by that bomber at the gate.
Yeah, Abbey Gate.
Abbey Gate, yeah. And I asked the Marine sniper in testimony, I asked him about the bomb.
Tyler Vargas?
The guy was blown up, shot 20-something operations. Yeah, great Marine, a great American. And I asked him about having that suicide bomber in his sights. He said, yeah, he had him in twice. And that was in testimony. Somebody should have gone to Leavenworth for that.
I agree.
They had that guy in their sights, and in the Biden administration, their Pentagon called it off twice. And they identified him. They knew what to look for. They knew they probably knew who he was. And they knew what he was carrying, a satchel. I mean, you don't carry a dadgum satchel to a riot, And that was part of the testimony. But again, your national media is not for us. They hate this country. I can't decide if they hate Trump or they hate America more. Which is it?
Probably a little bit of both. Bagram Air Force Base sat in the most strategic place in the world between Iraq, Iran, Russia, and China. The lie that American people were told that we were evacuating because America's sons and daughters. We had 2,000 people there at the time. We still have 80,000 in Japan since World War II. 20,000 in Germany, 30,000 in South Korea. Our presence prevents wars. It doesn't start wars. So the evacuation was biased. And
we left all that apparatus on the ground that's going to be killing our our kids in the future.
1,000%. I mean, we had two ISIS training camps when we left. Now we have about 60 ISIS training camps.
You remember when they said that? They said, well, the Afghans don't know how to fly those helicopters. And I said, the Chinese do.
Yeah.
And who was on the ground before y'all got out of there? The Chinese were.
And the Chinese wanted the lithium mineral rights from Hindu Kush Mountains.
Yeah,
They wanted to move sanctioned oil from Iran to China.
100%.
We were in the way of all that. So I believe we sold Afghanistan to our enemies from the White House. That's what I believe happened. Mm-hmm. But since that happened, you and I have fought from two different angles for the same thing, and that's the funding of the Taliban. Up to $80-something million a week of taxpayer dollars was going to the Taliban.
Well, that's the report I got was 82. When I started, it was $40 million a week. We send $40 million a week, and we literally send them pallets of cash, and they control the 3 banks, and they're going to give you all this rigmarole of, well, it's the NGOs. We have 1,000 NGOs working out of there, and then you add the UN NGOs and other things. They say, well, that's the UN money. That's our money. We fund it. We need to pull our ass out of the United Nations. That's a nightmare. But we got 3 banks over there basically, and the Lord just takes 10% with tithe. These guys are like the mob. Any ingress or egress of cash goes through these banks. The Taliban gets it, and it's all controlled. And these NGOs, the money flows back to this country. I met with Elon Musk. I was sitting across the table, me and you, and he said, Tim, I'm convinced that there's probably members of Congress that their family members or something are getting something off those NGOs. And they might not even know what they do, but you have somebody who's talking about somebody's wife or their girlfriend or possibly both. You got $1 billion sitting in some NGO, and they're going to pay somebody $100,000 no-show job. That ain't nothing. That ain't nothing. You see these dark money campaigns the day before the election. The people for ethical government. Tim Burchett's girlfriend in the 2nd grade says he pushed her in a mud puddle. The day before the election, and why won't Tim Burchett talk about it? And how are you going to respond to that? So, and that's what those NGOs are doing.
Well, the cash was separate for counterterrorism and for the recipients of the cash or on a terrorist watch list.
Yeah.
On the FBI's terrorist top 10 most wanted list, not even a watch list, the top 10 most wanted list, including someone that had an American prison.
And I know the last elected president of Afghanistan, I was on a Zoom with him not long ago, and he warned me. He said, Tim, you need to be careful, brother. He said, there's over 500 members of the Taliban, we think, in your country. Now, are they sleeper cells? Are they here just trying to get out? I don't know, but we don't know. That's the problem.
That's the problem is we don't know. One of the things that I'm assuming you're probably aware of this, that happens with that money, and I want the American people to know, is that there's a Taliban mortar fund. And so the surviving family members of a Taliban that was killed by a U.S. service member gets a house, property, and $1,000 a month of U.S. taxpayer dollars because we, the American military, killed the Taliban off that.
Mortgages, all that, retirement funds.
Our surviving Gold Star families don't get that. Why
they don't get nothing.
Paying it to Taliban?
My grandmother got a flag and a letter from the president.
Yeah. So where are you with that, and where
passed it in the House twice? Went to the Senate. It went to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and apparently they've had one meeting this year, and in that meeting this bill came up finally, and it went pretty partisan. I think we had a couple Democrats vote for it, but you've got a guy apparently that works on that committee who was the former. They say he wasn't the ambassador, but he might as well have been. I've got him on tape, several tapes, saying how friendly the Taliban were working with them. They're helping us, and I don't know. It may be enemy. My enemy's my friend. I don't know. I'm not in the military, but to me that stinks. And I think he was advising them, and they suppressed that bill. Well, we embarrassed them. My buddy Legend, who's a guy that Afghan. American citizen, dual citizenship type deal, and he's kind of been coaching me on the whole thing. He was on the Sean Ryan podcast, and I got to be friends with everybody. And so they, it's just waiting to come to the floor. Phone just needs to bring it to the floor, and it's so aggravating. And they say, well, it's not happening, and they brought a bunch of them in the skip to say, well, if it's not happening, then why are they afraid? Why won't they let you pass the dadgum bill? Pass the bill. Because it's a reporting element and there's a documentation. Government, when there's cash involved, they don't want to do that.
What would the bill do? It would freeze
just
that funding, or
yeah, it would. It literally, because they'd have to report back where that they did do that, what they said they weren't, and if they were doing it within the bill, it says they can't do it.
And then we could put some criteria on there, like not raping 9-year-old girls, maybe, right? Like, I mean,
Or burning hell.
Where's the human trafficking? I mean, with the human rights people, the women.
Where are the human rights people over there? And then you have,
I want that Me Too movement maybe to come back for a 9-year-old girl in Afghanistan. 20 million women and little girls there can't see a doctor, can't be a doctor, can't be a journalist, can't be a teacher.
They don't allow them to read. Where's their rights?
Yeah. So well, first of all, I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you, brother.
And I'm asking you on behalf of myself and the veteran community and the 20 million women and little girls in Afghanistan to please keep fighting that fight for that, because it is atrocious. It keeps me up at night to know that my taxpayer dollars was giving those monsters money.
100%. We're doing, and it's not the only place in the world we're doing it, bro.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's just one of them that's special. That's, I want to say special. It's just, I'm connected deeply to that one.
I know you are. I talk to many. I got people on my group in Washington I hang out with, some of and they're veterans. My buddy Eli Crane and others.
Yeah.
It's just,
Love Eli.
He lives my boy.
Yeah.
He's a SEAL. He's a sniper. He never says a whole lot.
Yeah. He's pretty quiet.
My brother-in-law was a sniper over there, and Marine. Very heavily decorated. He just never says a whole lot. My daddy said, if you found I can remember when he was alive, he'd say, if you found a sniper that talked a lot, he probably wasn't a sniper very long.
Eli was a real deal too. He's a solid guy. I don't know if you're friends with Derek Van Orden.
I know Van Orden and I are pretty close. We used to, when I found out who he was, he rides a Harley.
Yeah. Van Orden and I have been friends for many years, and as well.
He's been great to me. He says, if I ever go down on the steps of the Capitol, he'll be the first one there.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and he's just got a great family, a great person.
Love it. His wife had been real sick, and we've been praying for her. And he introduced me to her. Hey, Tim, this is that woman you were praying for. I said, glad you're here, dear.
Well, I thank you for your time here today. I thank you for what you're doing on the Hill.
You pay my salary, brother. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think we're gonna go now, and we're gonna shoot some of these guns.
Right on.
So, thanks again, sir. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I enjoyed that conversation with Congressman Burchett so much that I could talk to him all day. I'm also so grateful for our friendship, our partnership with Smith & Wesson. It's been incredible, and we're going to just keep going and doing great things together to bring you episodes like this. To come on the headquarters today and record this episode, get to go out in the range with Coach and see their new academy. It was just amazing, especially considering this is the Congressman's home district where Smith & Wesson is. And look, we want to know what you think of episodes like this. So please, if you liked it, click like. If you're not already subscribe, but leave your comments. And not only leave a comment, but leave a comment not just for us, but for the congressman. These guests often read the comments, and their staff does too. So please leave a comment and share this as far as wide as possible. Click the share button, get it out there. Also, if you're not already a member, please join our Patreon. It's one of the best ways you can support the show to keep episodes like this coming each week. Plus, you get exclusive content, behind-the-scenes stuff, extra commentary from our guests. There's so much valuable content for as low as $5 a month. So please support the show, join our Patreon, subscribe, and share it with as many people as you can. I'll see you next week. God bless and stay resilient.